Good evening, ladies and gentlemen, brothers and sisters. We're thankful on tonight for another episode of Insight. Insight is designed where we invite people on to give us their assessment of what's going on in the community and the world today. And with these great minds coming on, we are looking and hoping to be blessed by them. And so we are, again, thank you for this is, I think, our 24th episode. So we're thankful to God for that. Now, before I introduce my guest, I want to let you know there's 3 books that are, that are out that we're still promoting, and that is I See You, Sis by the Reverend Tisha Dixon Williams of the First Baptist Church of Bridgehampton, and a book called A Rose in a Dark Place by Sister Tamika Ridley, and then A Truth About Submission by the Reverend Herman Washington, the pastor of the Shiloh Baptist Church and Rockville Center. So we're asking certainly that you would keep those books in mind. You will see that these books are on Amazon. Now, our guest tonight is, and let me just say this, a friend of mine that I must have met over 22 years ago, at least, the Reverend Lawrence Aker III, which we affectionately call each other namesake. Interesting. I like being called Lawrence. My mother, particularly for some reason, didn't care for the name Lawrence, and she gave me the nickname Larry. But whenever they would call me Lawrence in school, I would answer to it. So I like it. It has a real classy name. And so, Pastor Aker, we're so glad to have you on this evening.
Good evening, Pastor Camp. Thank you for having me. Thank you. I certainly, I was looking back through my notes. You've blessed me to preach at Bethlehem Nation for well over 20 years. And so, yes, it is about that time.
And let me say that when I met Reverend Aker, it was Dr. Harry Wright, of course, his predecessor, who came to the Bethlehem Church for yearly. And he says to me, I still remember, I can still hear the cadence of his voice. Reverend Kev, I have a young fellow with me. I have a young fellow with me. And I wonder if he would just preach in my place. And what was I going to say to Dr. Wright? I wasn't going to say no to him, and respecting him as a senior pastor, but also respecting his choice. And Reverend Aker has been that to us and those of the Bethlehem Nation, Cornerstone Baptist Church, also known as Stone Nation. And so we're glad to have you. Now, Pastor Aker, I'm going to ask you a few questions. You can elaborate on them from how you see things today. But now, one thing that maybe the public does not remember or doesn't read, maybe some that don't read up on it, is that at the point in this country, we had 2 presidents at the same time, Abraham Lincoln, and then there was Jefferson Davis, the president of the Confederate State of America. And that was all, of course, Americans fighting each other over the issue of civil war. Now, is there a possibility for what you see, Pastor, but certainly not exactly like that one, but a whole different one that could be possibly just as dangerous or deadly? Do you see a possibility of a second civil war?
Well, I think definitely it's an understatement to say we are living in unprecedented times. Right now, the Make America Great Again crowd, that is a staunch crowd, and a crowd that's willing to give the Biden-Harris ticket a chance to lead and heal and transform this nation. So I definitely think it's our nation is divided. We're in a 2-party system, but I think, thanks be to God, because we do have the transition of power and governmental forces and laws in place that we are prevented from having that type of split democracy, if you can even call that a democracy.
Congressman Jeffrey said a very powerful statement today. It was so powerful and rhythmic. I didn't even memorize it, but it still stays in my head, in which he referred to as Donald Trump an impeachable president, something to that effect.
Yeah.
And he has certainly shown verbally the direction or the present situation of this country today. There's no question about how that plays out. Now, what I want to ask you, Pastor Aker, is this. I hear people say this thing. I've heard it say that we have to get away from race. And even though, certainly yourself, myself personally, we don't hate anybody, but they insist that we get away from race, and not just white people. These are Black people saying this. So yeah. What's your response to that?
Well, no, I think race is an inevitable issue. And, we always refer to America, so to speak, the original sin, the sin of slavery. But I think race is a topic until Jesus returns. We have to get away from inequality because of race. We need to get away from discrimination because of race. But race has been an issue from the turn of century, from agricultural, economic paradigms. And so race is an issue that cannot be separated.
Yeah.
I don't mean to sound doom and gloom, but I mean, the issue of race is here to stay. I mean, unfortunately, your grandchildren, my grandchildren, everybody faces, those challenges.
Yeah. I want to say that Pastor Aker, and certainly Seastone Nation, we welcome you. You're watching, and certainly to his very wonderful wife, Lady Cynthia Aker, and of course the Aker children. I've always said to Pastor Aker and to Lady Aker what wonderful children that they do have. And his son, maybe about 5 years ago, I think, and I was preaching at the Seastone Nation for Good Friday, and I was climbing up the steps, and his son was operating the video, and I said to him, "You're gonna make me look good, right?" He just nodded his head and smiled. He didn't say a word.
You got a vote of confidence.
Yeah, he did, and I appreciate it. Yes, sir. Considering now you from Texas, is that right, Pastor Aker?
Yeah, I was born in California. My father was a Methodist pastor, so we moved every 3 years. And but I was born in California. Then we moved to Atlanta. My dad was at ITC. Then we moved to Memphis, Tennessee. And but my formative years, you got moved to Dallas. That's where I went to grade school and high school. Yeah.
Now, California, was that Compton? I shouldn't be stereotypical.
Yeah. It was Northern California. Outside of Oakland, yeah. I was born in the same hospital that Kamala Harris was born in, Kaiser.
Okay. Great leaders born in Texas. Now,
hospital.
So it opens the door for me to ask this question to you. Considering your situation born in California, moving around in Memphis and in Texas, how do you see their states, and what are people communicating to you how those states are in this time?
Well, I think, on a case by case basis, you see California is already a blue state. I mean, that's a done deal. And of course, it's the home of Vice President-elect. Georgia has just turned blue, and tremendous runoff wins with Dr. Warnock and Ossoff. Yeah. Texas, I think in the next 4 years, it has the potential to turn blue. There was a lot of voting irregularities in Texas this last time. You had in Harris County, you had one drop-off voting destination for over hundreds, thousands of people. So, I think in the next 4 years, the push, and I could see Texas going the same way as Georgia. And even the week of the election, there were those anti-Trump, the Trump cars on the freeway, that incident. So I think the tide is really turning.
My guest tonight, the Reverend Lawrence Aker, the pastor of the Cornerstone Baptist Church. certainly affectionately known as the Sea Stone Nation. I asked if you would just put that on the screen, Cash App. My friend and my brother, certainly he will be a blessing tonight. You will see the Cash App come across your screen, $ Aker 3. So that means he's Lawrence Aker the third. And I also want to say that I want to thank Reverend Derek Jackson and certainly Linda Atkinson Kendall, who administrative assistant and a deacon in training, Deaconess Asia Camp, my daughter, Asia Camp's my daughter too, and Naja Camp. These are all the producers and creators of this particular program, so I want to thank them. Now, Pastor, considering technology and social media, we know through that the public has been watched. How much more, or I should ask the question, how more intense is the public watched in general?
Well, I think, we've always heard that phrase, Big Brother is watching. I think now just with surveillance and all types of electronic inventions and just the software, I mean, we have no idea about the gravity of TGIF, Twitter, Google, Instagram, and Facebook, very powerful mediums. And so that's just the world that we're living in, and that's just a sign of the times.
Yeah. Now, I'm sure you've read or saw the news about the increase in the National Guard, which probably brings us back to our early point of Civil War. What do you think of that one?
Well, I think it's mixed emotions. I think it's in some ways it's comforting because it is a necessary evil, and on the other spectrum, I think unfortunately it was downplayed or not really taken seriously enough, the preparation for that rally. But Zora Neale Hurston says there are some years that ask a question, and there are other years that answer it. And so in these unprecedented times, I don't know if coming out of 2020, I don't know if it was asking or answering, because we face so many challenges and disparities. And I guess my surprise with the Capitol riot insurrectionists is that white people are surprised. That's my surprise. It's just surprise.
Yeah.
It's like when you do a you on you. It's no surprise for us. I mean, we've been chronologically and historically talking about this since Jamestown, 1619.
Yeah.
But you talk about Rosewood, you talk about Tulsa, you talk about adverse possession in the middle 19th century. A gang of white men can just show up at your house for newly freed slaves who are building and agriculturally working their future, to show up with shotguns and say you got till sundown to move. So this is nothing new. And obviously in the sovereign part of this whole narrative, it doesn't catch God by surprise. And so if it doesn't catch God by surprise, I'm not going to lose any sleep over it.
Yeah, that's right. That's right. Judging by what you just said, and I had the opportunity to hear many of your sermons, and I tune in, and of course, I love the work that you're doing.
Thank you.
What you just said, does it now bring out people, or at least teachers, whether they're Sunday school teachers in general in schools, do virtual, or preachers, that to remind this generation of this not being a surprise for us and where we've come from, and to mention those things like Tulsa and those towns that were burned to the ground and those communities destroyed? Does this allow the opportunity to reinforce that back? Because I think for most cases, in some cases, I should say, we kind of got away from that. And there were many.
I think every situation is a teaching moment. You just like the Arlo Hotel. And a 14-year-old boy having a cell phone is Emmett Till 2.0. Another 14-year-old boy in Monty, Mississippi,
right.
from Chicago who allegedly, whistles at this woman. But fortunately for this young man in Midtown, his father was there to intercede and intervene. But we all know how that could have ended, how tragically that could have ended. And so, yeah, to answer your question, I think that is a teaching moment. All the correlations, just as our Jewish brothers and sisters are told from Deuteronomy and all the other festivals and high holy days that they have. Teach your children, remind them. And so I think we have to do the same thing.
Considering what you and your wife have raised wonderful children, and I'm of course you can answer as it relates to all of the children, but considering that you both have a son, what's the emotional concern there that gets at you and Lady Aker?
Yeah, well, I think that's the talk, as we say, is something that cannot be underestimated or written off, because I mean, I tell my son, always have your ID with you. You go in a store, get a bag, have a receipt. It's just the extra precautions that we take, and still myself, even as an adult male, I know when I'm driving, I gotta, when I take out the trash now, Pastor, I got my ID on me.
Yeah,
And I put on a mask because I don't want cops to just drive by and say
yeah,
I'm looting, or, it's like, hey, here's my ID. I live here, It's serious, man. It's sad, but it is serious.
yeah, yeah. That would be an emotional pull, as it is on certainly all about children. Now, considering the vaccine, this is always a debate, Pastor Aker.
Mm-hmm.
Shouldn't, and I'm not asking you to go on either side, but certainly, what is your response to that?
Yeah, well, listen, I unequivocally, man, I have no problem with people taking the vaccine. I know we have the horror stories of the Tuskegee experience and Henrietta Leaks and just how Black bodies have been medical experiments, and many without anesthesia. But this COVID crisis, and it is a crisis, I think it is so the color of COVID, as we've seen how it is ravaging our community. I think it's imperative for those who are able to get the vaccine.
And what do you think about those who made up in their mind that they're skeptical? And going back to your point, Tuskegee and Nazi Germany, before they even brought them on the trains, they gave them shots.
Right.
So what do you say to folks like that?
Well, I think right now it's education. It's education and information, and let's do everything we can to educate our community, whether it's Moderna or Pfizer. Let's learn as much as we can, and then ultimately let people make their decisions. But I think that's part of our pastoral role. We can preach, we can teach, we can lead, but ultimately people have to make their own decisions.
Yeah. Reverend Lawrence Aker, my guest here on Insight, and one of who I admire as a great thinker. And of course, one thing I've learned, Pastor Aker, is that my children teach me to think, even if it's not something I want them to do. But they teach us to think. Now, considering our various communities, how does the Seastone Nation contribute in the communities in which you serve? Where there are churches that are doing various pantries, but how do you contribute? How does your church contribute in the community to which they are?
So, as you know, we're in the heart of e.s.t, and we're surrounded by Lebanon, Bethany, and Concord, and sister churches, Bridge Street, right around the corner. Other great AME ministries around the corner, but we all work together. I mean, we're not in competition. We're in conjunction. As far as I'm concerned, we were blessed to do a food pantry with World Central Kitchen from March until early fall, and so we were getting out meals 6 days a week, and that was a blessing to our community. and we tried to focus on that. We've tried to do housing. I kind of inherited that, where we have housing, and we'd like to continue to upgrade that. But like everyone within our zip code, we're just trying to meet the needs in the midst of this gentrification for our people, and just to continue to be a center. Be, as I got the nation theme from you, that we are a nation. It's not just Baptist Church, NBC, and our little conclaves of denominational, but we are a nation.
Yeah, that's very. Yeah. And Pastor Aker, no one knows that, as learned as you are. Pastor Aker is a graduate from Howard University.
HU.
Howard University, to which your son is attending. He's a part of that as well.
He's a senior right now. So
what is he going to be one of these?
No, not a Delta.
Okay. Not the Delta. That's the women. Okay, all right. I'm sorry.
I know today's their Founders Day, so I thought you were. That's why I thought you were shouting them out.
No, I had put up something, Pastor Aker and Missouri. I know that. And as they should be. I've never been a part of any of the Deltas, not because I never had the fortune to be able to go to an African-American school, naturally, because, the finances that took place with my mom. I happened to go to Queens College and the College of New Rochelle. And being part of a Masonic lodge, this is what I was expressing, is that all of those fraternities are actually birthed from the Masonic lodge.
It's our culture, man.
It's our culture.
Black culture. It's black culture, and it all revolves around. It's all one big family, man.
Yeah, and family. Well, Masons and Eastern Stars, nobody knows we're around. I know y'all like to show off. I don't know what y'all be doing, but I know they like to do that. But it's a great thing. So
how about how we can serve the community?
Absolutely, absolutely.
Yeah.
Now, as a clergy, how are we considering Dr. King's words that go like this? In the end, we will remember not the words of our enemies, but the silence of our friends.
Sure. I think in many ways we see that now with BLM, with protests and marches, and with kind of people coming out of the sidelines since the public lynching, if you will, of George Floyd. It's been a roll call, just a gut check, just to see where people stand. And I think, as we have this new term, retrumplicans or trumplicans, some people have taken that hook, line, and sinker. They drink the Kool-Aid. And I was listening today, and they were saying that Republicans that did not vote to impeach the president, it's not that they so much imbibe the Trump aura, but they are so afraid of his crowd, and that his supporters would literally do harm to their family. And so that's just I just, man, that Republican Party is being hijacked in that situation is just a tragedy once again for our democracy.
Again, our guest tonight, the Reverend Lawrence Aker. I just want to announce to those who are coming on for the next 3 weeks, if Reverend Jackson can get that ready, on next Wednesday at 8:00, we will have Minister Henry Muhammad, student minister of Muhammad Mosque number 7C. That's right in the East New York section of Brooklyn. And, I really want to get his take on, we have a tendency to look at what our Christian brothers and sisters are doing, but we don't realize that this has to stretch forth. And Minister Henry Muhammad is coming on next Wednesday. Following that Wednesday, we will have Bishop Timothy Clark, senior pastor of First Church of God of Columbus, Ohio. So we're looking forward to that as we have these wonderful preachers, and certainly a wonderful one tonight. Now, Pastor,
thank you. Thank you, Pat. I'm glad you brought me on before those guests. Thank you. Thank you for giving me the early slot.
No, man, you right there with him. I would never say that you're diminished at all. You're right with him. Now, you are on the board, and I want to thank Pastor Aker for letting my son in the ministry, Reverend Tim Taylor, know about IC3. Pastor Taylor went there. Reverend Aker told him about it, and then Reverend Taylor told me about it. And since you are a part of the board members of IC3, which is the Issachar Conference, what is the challenges and adjustments to not just the organization, but as it relates to your church and your family as well?
In terms of IC3 meeting the needs of conference needs, or?
And what, because I know that they do virtual, but what are they doing in between that?
Well, your virtual has kind of been a default mechanism of every ministry, but I'm honored to be a part with a great group of leaders, and 2020 had to be virtual. It really just was more of a eavesdropping session, and so the hope is for 21 that we can do the story times and the sermons and put it all in a digital package. And so, I mean, basically, like everyone, we are all in the process of relearning how to do church. It's nothing, you can't pontificate about it. You know, everybody's learning it. When you hear people say, we're doing better than we ever had since the shutdown, my response is, I don't know what you were doing before. If you're doing better in the shutdown, because I mean, everybody's struggling in some sense, because it is a major adjustment. So just trying to how you redo church. I mean, church now is definitely a 60, 75-minute platform at the max now. Yeah. And I know we're from Brooklyn. Our ushers have to march. We have to do acknowledgments. We do a lot of, but so Lord willing, when we do come back, I think we will have to do some changes in our services in order to continue this this appetite that we've had to create in the midst of this pandemic. And so IC3 is making that shift, Pastor, to be able to give cutting edge suggestions and models for how we do church post-COVID. Right? We've been saying, I said this on preaching today, I think it's going to be BC and AC, before COVID and after COVID.
Yeah.
That's where we are.
Yeah, that would be, and that's the challenge, Pastor Aker, because I know you probably have emphasized to the people at the Cornerstone Church about how things won't be exactly the same. That don't make it bad, but it's not going to be as we've known it. And even though it's said, it's almost as if there are people that will accept that transition, but it's almost as if there are people who can't accept that that's going to happen.
I mean, that's the reality. That's the stark reality that we are forced to deal with. Church as we knew it before is not going to be the same. And even with vaccinations, with mask wearing, with temperature checking, with social distancing, I just don't. I know they've had some. I don't want to say denominations or cultures who have had mass weddings with 7,000 and 8,000 people there. That's not going to be the Black church coming back. That's not going to be us coming back. No, that's not going to be us coming back. I mean, we got to make some major paradigm shifts, and you know, I want to see. And then Brooklyn is different. Brooklyn is different. What works in Brooklyn? What works in the mega South or in the West Coast or other places? You know, you have a slither of a parking lot. Our parking lot is as is.
Oh man,
You have a slither.
a slither.
You have a slither.
I have a slither. Reverend Aker, because he's on that board of IC3, I had to, of course, there are those who I've got to know. Certainly Dr. Jerry Carter, who I will be having on a couple of months down the line, and certainly Kimberly Credit, pastors out there in Jersey. Her and Jerry pastor out there in Jersey, and numerous people that I had a chance to meet.
Different suburban ministries. They have some luxuries that we don't have, and we have some challenges that they don't have.
That's true.
But it's all relative.
Yeah, it's all relative. Let me just ask this: what books, and Dr. Aker, I know you read. What books have you read? Would you recommend to this audience for their own learning? Because I mean, if we're locked in, we're doing a few things. We're either eating, drinking some water, eating some more, drinking some orange juice, eating some more. So what books would you recommend to this audience?
I think you're right, man, because your mood determines your food. And you want to have a balanced appetite. But just at the foremost, I don't think there's any substitute for the 1 year Bible. I do a 1 year Bible, so I try to keep on track with that, because as a pastor, preacher, and you do that prolifically, you can't just read the Bible when you need a sermon. So it takes daily bread for daily strength. So I suggest a 1 year Bible. But I've been reading some new things. Kendi's How Not to Be a Anti-Racist, White Fragility.
Oh yeah.
So I've also been rereading some things just in this context. The New Jim Crow, which I think is still so relevant. Michelle Alexander, and just going back and putting all of that in the context of what we're dealing with right now. I mean, she does such an outstanding job with the Southern what do you call it? The Southern strategy of how that shifted Democratic and Republican political tickets, law and order, which is the Trumplican playbook is so old, man. And Kevin Cruz, One Nation Under God, and I think that is just phenomenal, man, to really understand the religious right, where they came from, and how people are evangelicals still gravitate to a now twice impeached president. So those are just a few, but I'm trying to do audio books more as well. So just to make sure, even if I'm trying to get a workout or something, or just I want to make sure I get something in my ear, in my head, every week.
Now, how is you still have family in Texas? Is that correct, sir?
Yes.
How are they doing?
And my wife as well. Yeah, they're doing well. They're doing well. Texas is a hot spot, and of course, their governor Greg Abbott is basically an anti-masker. So it's you have to really be vigilant in a lot of those southern states. But thank God they're doing well.
Yes, I forgot that Lady Aker is a Texas person as well.
Yes, sir.
God bless you. You had to go all the way from California to Texas to find your wife. That was good.
The Lord is my shepherd. I see what I want.
Miss Aker, you did a good job too. You had to wait in Texas for somebody from California. I'm a side with Sister Aker too. Now let me ask you this, Pastor. Prophetically, I just want to be able to ask you this. I've asked a few. One pastor friend. There's a few that work out in certain parts of Long Island, and of course they work for their local governments and things of that nature.
Okay.
How do you feel with the prophetic voice? Is the prophetic voice just as strong while you work for the government that you one day have to hold at task or hold accountable?
In terms, is there like you mean like a conflict, like obey Caesar or obey God? Or?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
Yeah, well, I think certainly, Paul was clear to the Thessalonians and others that if a man doesn't work, he doesn't eat. So
Yeah.
definitely, people need their career path. But certainly, if your occupation, if your supervisor or something puts you in an uncompromising position where you have to make a decision, where you have to make a stand, then I think people should try to get a escape plan or a transition plan.
Yeah. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
I talked to someone that I think Reverend Roger Williams, who pastors First Baptist Church of Glen Cove, and I asked him about that, and he says, Camp, it doesn't change my voice at all, and as a result of that, he has shown a certain consistency when it comes to the pulpit and working outside. Now, prophetically, how do you see the future of this land personally, of the United States of America and the world, prophetically? Because, Pastor Aker, prophetically is like, some people think that the Lord has told me this, but prophetic is like what you see presently that could up the road turn into something else. So how do you see it prophetically?
No, well, I think, I've seen paradigms when you look back through, just in our context, Black church, you had accommodationists, you had sustainers, and you had reformers. Richard Lisker says if you had to put MLK in one of those classifications, he would be a reformer. Wow. So prophetically, I want to be a reformer. I want to be able to speak truth to power. I want to be able to educate my congregation and let them make responsible decisions. I want to make sure that I'm doing my part as a prophetic leader of a congregation, that I have a relevant rhema word to speak in this season, because these are trying times, but it's great preaching times. These are great preaching times.
Yeah.
People need comfort. People need encouragement more than ever. So prophetically, I think our job more than ever is to equip the congregation to live in these times. And how do we equip them? With the word, with resources, especially when we talk about mental challenges and mental health. I think that's another part of equipping. So prophetically, if you got a word for people, but they still go home hungry, or they still go home to hell on the job, or they still are disenfranchised, then I don't know if your prophetic word is really ruminating as it should.
I heard, I got to ask you this question, but I heard years ago, about 15, maybe 17 years ago, the late Dr. Gardner Taylor said, I'm not sure if my voice can work or be effective in these times.
Yeah, I remember when I first started pastoring, I would sit with him. He'd say the same thing. He'd say, I feel sorry for you, son. I wouldn't want to preach in these days.
Yeah, he said that to a group of us. He says, I do not envy you pastors today. He said that in 1999. But that brings me to this.
This is a guy that built a church in the midst of Jim Crow, rebuilt a church. Yeah. This is a guy that didn't, he didn't have members that had a black card and who gobs of followers on social media and things that people long after today. But I mean, of course, his work speaks for himself, the legendary. But yeah, I mean, I remember him saying that he would not, he did not want to deal with this generation.
Which brings me to my point. There was something on social media last week. There were, a group of preachers, and one preacher brought up something, and before he said it, he said that I know I'm going to get killed for this. I know I'm going to get criticized for this. And he said that I don't think Dr. Taylor's preaching would work for now.
Mm-hmm.
I mean,
well, I think that's I think it just depends on the hearer, man. The parable of the sower, Jesus says some fell on stony ground, some fell and the sun scorched it, some came and
it's true.
The birds took it away. I'm rereading right now Sandy Ray's Journeying Through a Jungle. I was talking to my predecessor, Pastor Emeritus Harry Starks, right today, and we were talking about those 12 sermons in there. Dr. Rice said are just as fresh as today's New York Times. He told me to tell you hello, by the way.
Oh, okay. Okay, very good.
I would encourage any preacher, read those 12 sermons. When faith bogs down, the challenge of the hill country. There's keeping a foot in stumbling times. Those sermons still speak today, and God's word still speaks today. So I think to some degree, if you're talking about Dr. Taylor's kind of Victorian style or what have you, may not be a certain appetite for certain people, but I think the word is still relevant.
And he was very poetic. He was very poetic. And he held you at the end of your seat. But then, so did Notorious B.I.G. He was poetic too. And so when I heard that, and I'm open to anything that's being said as it relates to ministry and the various forms of preaching. I just think that, and I could be wrong, that Dr. Taylor would have figured out how to.
Yeah, I think more than ever. I mean, if you read John Calvin's sermons from Geneva or Martin Luther, I mean, Elizabethan prose and what have you. But if you're really seeking a word, you can get something out of it. That
Dietrich Bonhoeffer's mother told him that if you're going to be a Christian, you have to be authentic. I mean, Dietrich Bonhoeffer died and was around before I was born, but his mother was very impacting after reading her words. So there's room for it, because Chaka Khan said, excuse me for bringing up Chaka Khan. Chaka Khan said, she says, she didn't mind working with anyone as long as they were able to keep her beat, because she was going to do her vocals. And she was able to work with anyone. And I think that it speaks true of Duke Ellington and John Coltrane, when Duke Ellington said, well, I can't work. I don't know if I can work with John Coltrane, because John Coltrane was like, and then Duke Ellington was like this guy of rhythmic jazz. So there's something that you can adapt to. And Duke Ellington had to learn how to adapt to John Coltrane. And John Coltrane had to learn to follow Duke Ellington's mood. So I guess you have to excuse me, Pastor Aker. I just think that jazz is influenced by the Black preacher.
Oh, absolutely. The improvisation and same with the kind of the metaphor of mentors and mentoring. Is it Coltrane or Thelonious Monk that did Ugly Beauty?
Which that was Thelonious Monk.
That's Monk. Yeah. Monk, like what you need to hear the most, but you probably don't want to hear the least. And in terms of that's where a mentor comes in, that somebody that can help you work with different people that and I feel the same way. I mean, if you give me a microphone, you give me an assignment, whatever my assignment is, I got to shut everything out and fulfill the assignment, whether it's reading the scripture, doing a prayer, or delivering a sermon. Everything else is secondary, tertiary, quaternary. What's the assignment? What's the assignment? I like Shaka. I can work with anybody.
Shaka says I can work with anybody.
Yeah.
And she talked about Rick James. She said, no, not Rick. He wished he had, but no, not Rick. And anyway, we talked about mentoring, and who are those who mentored and influenced you?
Oh man, I would say early, my grandfather and my father, my first two mentors. my grandfather had probably the equivalent of a sixth grade education, but he was diligent with his money. He worked. My grandfather migrated from Louisiana to California. He would train white guys in Louisiana, and then the next week they'd be his supervisor, And so he migrated to California, worked as a longshoreman in Oakland. My grandmother was a housekeeper, and so but they saved their money, and they wanted to make sure that my dad went to college, got his education. They did that, and so my dad also a mentor. He taught me how to read, how to speed read. Taught me how to do numbers and math. I struggled in math, and he showed me analogies with free throw percentages and things like that. And if your favorite player has 10 free throws and he makes 8 of them, what's his percentage? And so I was able to learn that and grapple that on the higher numbers, but also just spiritually. I mean, my dad, I went to class with him when he was at ITC. When I didn't go to daycare, I was in class with him. So that was one of my big mentors, first mentor. And then my pastor, the late Dr. E.K. Bailey, he licensed me, ordained me.
Oh, yeah.
And I was his research assistant for 4 years. So that gave me an opportunity to really, every week, sermon construction, point transitions, illustrations, quotes, every week for 4 years. So that was a huge impact on me. And of course, Harry Starks Wright Sr.
Yes,
and, who was my predecessor. He gave me a chance, took me to Bethlehem one night. I thought everything was set. I already thought I was preaching. And then we got there and he asked the preacher if it's all right. I thought everything was already set.
You thought it was already set, right? So
he told me, hey, we're going to go to Bethlehem and he just said a word for me. I thought everything was set. And we got there. He asked the preacher, is that right?
I remember that very, very well. We remember that very, very well. And sure. E.K. Bailey, you married his daughter. Is that correct?
His niece, yeah.
His niece. That's look, you were under a mentor, and then you get to meet his niece. Yeah. I mean, that's. I mean, the real deep.
We were dating. We were dating before I started preaching, so it was kind of.
Yeah, but the deep people would say, "Yeah, God worked that thing out." I mean,
He did work it out. He did work it out.
But that wasn't bad. So I like the way you talked about mentoring. I love the way you talked about E.K. Bailey, who, by the way, is really one of the legends of the pulpit. Now, Miles Davis once said, Reverend Aker, he says, I'm not a legend. He says, a legend is one who's sitting down in his rocking chair. He said, I'm still trying to learn. That's what Miles
yeah.
And so with Dr. E.K. Bailey.
Miles was still driving his Lamborghini around and man.
People forget, and I know that this is Pastor Aker and I's friends just talking and casual, because we do that over the phone periodically. Yeah. Miles Davis' father was a very influential dentist and very wealthy dentist.
Yeah, very influential family. Yeah,
that's right.
He didn't experience racism until he left home.
Well, I'm gonna tell you this, and then we're gonna then I want you to close out, words. We took my mother, my brother and I, my oldest brother, and I took my mother to see Sly and the Family Stone at then the Felt Forum. Okay. So what happened is Sly comes out, and it looked like a nuclear explosion, took place up there. There was a lot of smoke. But anyway, what had happened was that my brother went toward the bathroom, and then he saw Roberta Flack, and he was talking to Roberta Flack, and this little guy said to him, started cussing him out, using some profane language. He said, "Don't you see I'm talking, man? Don't you see I'm talking?" It happened to be Miles Davis cussing out my brother.
Oh, man.
So my brother said, Man, I was about to beat that guy, but I said to myself, "No, you was gonna beat him up, man. Yeah, Miles Davis come from a world that you didn't want to even bother." So, but Pastor, give us a closing encouraging words and remarks, and then after you do that, just give us a word of prayer, if you please.
Okay. Well, as I said at the outset, this is 2021. And some years ask a question, some years answer a question. And I know a lot of us are in between in that flux, things that did not materialize in 20, things that you may be waiting for to materialize in 21. I know I have things that I'm working on. I've shared them with you. And but just don't give up. Don't despair. Philippians 1:6 reminds us that he who began a good work in you will complete it and he will bring it to pass. So, right now, as long as you still have a pulse, God still has a plan. And so grab hold of everything in 21, get you a daily reading plan. One thing we're doing at Seastone Nation, and we're just in the early stages of it, I've challenged every member at least once a week. This is 2021, at least once a week, try to spend 21 minutes with God. Try to spend 21 minutes with God. And if you can't do 21, do 5, do 10, try to work your way up. But I think more than ever, we have to hear from God to have that strength. And I'm glad you talked about mentoring, because I think that's so important in order to get to where you want to be, to have someone who can speak into your life. And I raise the question, who is it that has the authority to speak in your life and to tell you what's wrong and to tell you what's right? And if you don't have not identified a person who has the authority to do that, then that's something that would propel you in 21 and days to come. I have 2 pastoral mentors, and so I highly recommend that. But God is still working. He's sovereign.
Yes.
Don't worry about the Trumplicans. Don't worry about the doomsday prophets. This is a brand new year, brand new opportunity. God is still working.
Pastor Aker, that was, and before you actually close out in prayer, the mentoring piece is very important. I when young preachers who come to me, they may not think I want to hear them, but I do want to hear them. And if they come to me, I won't refuse them. Some of them feel a certain kind of way about me, because I tend to speak as outspoken as much as I can. But that doesn't mean that if a young preacher comes to me, I'm not going to turn them away at no time. Right. I'm not going to turn them, because they're too important for the future of the gospel and the future of people who are listening to the gospel for me to turn them away. So I want to thank you for your family trail that contributed so much to you. Please, Pastor, close us out in the word of prayer.
All right. Well, thank you for this show and for this opportunity to share. I want to pray. Father God, I thank you now for this hour. I thank you for this moment. I thank you for those who are viewing or maybe will view. And I just ask that a Rhema word spirit will come over this broadcast, and that we will be propelled to go forward in 21. Thank you for this pastor. Thank you for Bethlehem Nation. And may we realize, because of you, the best is yet to come. We ask this in the name of Jesus, our risen Savior. Amen.
Amen. Brothers and sisters, you see the Cash App. Be a blessing to Pastor Aker, and because he has been a blessing to us tonight, and for any of you, and not just preachers, for those of you who are young ladies in your church and young brothers coming up, do not hesitate to use the resource that is at your hand, and to ask to go and to certainly allow yourself to be mentored. Don't forget, next week, our guest will be Minister Henry Muhammad from Mosque number 7C. And he will be our guest. And then, of course, right after that following Wednesday will be the Reverend Timothy Clark, who always says, Larry, I so enjoy. He's probably watching tonight, Pastor Aker. Larry, I so enjoy. And I said to Reverend Clark, I wish I had the congeniality that you have. I really did, but
well, when you have a school named after you, you can do that kind of stuff. they got the Timothy Clark School now.
That's true. That's true, Clark School.
Yeah.
Pastor, thank you so much for your friendship. And thank you, man, for your brotherhood. Thank you. Thank God for your family and the Seastone Nation. Thank you so much for coming on. Brothers and sisters, be a blessing to Pastor Aker. Thank you so much.
I'm honored. Thank you, Pastor.
Thank you.
All right.